An entire colony vanished, leaving behind only a single cryptic word carved on a post. History is filled with moments like this where the trail of evidence simply runs cold. We are about to journey through 25 of the most baffling events whose true origins remain completely unexplained. You will discover the full scope of these enigmas, from ancient societies that disappeared overnight to ships found drifting without a soul on board and bizarre artifacts that defy their own time. We will explore the strange case of a dancing plague that gripped a city and the mysterious blast that flattened a Siberian forest. Which of these historical puzzles do you think holds the most perplexing secret? The year was 1587, and the small English settlement on Roanoke Island was hanging by a thread. Governor John White, desperately needing supplies for the struggling colony, made the difficult decision to sail back to England, leaving behind his own family, including his newborn granddaughter Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. He expected to return within months, but a major naval war between England and Spain delayed him for 3 long years. When his ship finally landed on Roanoke shores again in 1590, he found a scene of utter silence. The entire settlement, over 100 men, women, and children, had simply vanished. The houses were dismantled and the fort was empty. There were no signs of a struggle, no graves, and no clues except for 2 cryptic messages carved into wooden posts. One post bore the word CROATOAN and another had the letters CRO. It was not a message of distress, but a single, baffling word that would echo through the centuries. This single word has fueled endless speculation. Was it a destination, a clue, or a warning? The most prominent theory suggests the colonists facing starvation, integrated with the nearby Croatan people, a local Native American tribe. Some reports from later English settlers mention encounters with indigenous people who had gray eyes, spoke English, and lived in European-style houses, which seemed to support this idea. Yet, no definitive archaeological evidence has ever been found to confirm a mass integration. Other theories propose they fell victim to a devastating disease that left no time for burials, or that they were attacked by Spanish soldiers who were active in the region. The Spanish theory, however, is weakened by a lack of any records from Spain claiming such an attack. The most haunting possibility is that the colonists tried to sail back to England on their own and were lost at sea, but if that were the case, why leave the carved word at all? The word CROATOAN was their only legacy, a permanent question mark etched into history. This colony's disappearance is a ghost story written not in ink, but in absence, a void where a community should have been. It reminds us that some stories are not finished with a period, but with a question. Decades later and far out at sea, another kind of emptiness echoed the mystery of Roanoke. The American merchant brigantine Mary Celeste was spotted adrift in the Atlantic Ocean on December 4, 1872. The crew of the British ship Dei Gratia, who discovered her, noted something was immediately wrong. She was sailing oddly, her sails partially set and tattered. After hailing her with no response, a boarding party made a discovery that would become the stuff of nautical legend. The Mary Celeste was perfectly seaworthy, her hull intact and her cargo of industrial alcohol still secure. But the captain, Benjamin Briggs, his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, and the entire crew of 7 were gone without a trace. The scene on board was a paradox of normalcy and profound absence. A half-eaten meal was still on the table in the captain's cabin. His personal belongings and his wife's sewing machine were left undisturbed. The ship's logbook was found, its last entry being just 10 days earlier with no indication of distress. Yet the single lifeboat was missing and one of the 2 pumps had been disassembled. A sword was found lying beneath the captain's bed, and there was about 3.5 feet of water in the bilge, though not nearly enough to threaten the vessel. Everything pointed to a sudden, rushed but orderly abandonment of a ship that was in no immediate danger of sinking. So why did they leave? Theories have swirled for over a century. Perhaps a waterspout struck nearby, creating a terrifying noise and shaking the ship, convincing the crew the vessel was about to go down. Maybe a leak in the alcohol cargo caused fears of a massive explosion, prompting a panicked evacuation into the lifeboat. The idea of a pirate attack or mutiny holds little weight, as no valuables were stolen and there was no sign of violence. Even the possibility of a sudden, massive seaquake has been proposed. Yet, every explanation has a flaw. If they abandoned ship in a panic, why were personal items so neatly left behind? If they calmly took to the lifeboat, why were they never seen again in a sea the Mary Celeste herself was easily traversing? The very ordinariness of the scene is what makes it so chilling. It is a snapshot of a life interrupted, a story that simply stops mid-sentence, leaving us to wonder what fleeting terror or miscalculation could convince 10 people to vanish into the open ocean. The sea gives up its ghosts reluctantly, but history's strangest mysteries sometimes unfold not on the water but on solid ground. In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg was gripped by a phenomenon that defied all reason. It began with a single woman, Frau Trophia, who stepped into the street and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration, only a frantic, compulsive movement that she could not stop. She danced for days, her feet bleeding, her body exhausted, and within a week, dozens more had joined her. By the end of the month, the dancing plague had ensnared hundreds of people, their bodies twisting and jerking in an unstoppable marathon of motion that led to collapse, heart attacks, and death. This was not a joyous festival but a public health crisis of the most bizarre kind. The city was already under immense strain. Years of devastating harvests had led to widespread famine, and diseases like smallpox and syphilis were rampant. The population lived in a state of constant fear and profound stress, their lives dictated by a rigid social hierarchy and a powerful religious belief system that saw misfortune as divine punishment. In this pressurized environment, the dancing plague found fertile ground. Authorities at the time were baffled. Their first solution was based on the old saying, "If you cannot beat them, join them." They built a special stage, hired musicians, and even brought in professional dancers, believing that if the afflicted danced themselves out, the mania would pass. This plan backfired spectacularly, only encouraging more people to join the frenzied dance. When this failed, the explanation turned to the supernatural. Many believed the dancers were victims of a curse or demonic possession, a collective sin being punished by a wrathful saint. Yet, exorcisms and prayers had little effect. A more modern theory points to a biological culprit, ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on damp rye, a staple grain of the region. When consumed, it can cause violent muscle spasms, convulsions, and vivid hallucinations, symptoms that mirror the descriptions of the dancers. The problem with this theory is that ergotism typically causes gangrene and unbearable pain, making prolonged dancing nearly impossible. Most victims seem to be in a trance-like state, not seizing in agony. This is why many psychologists today see the event as one of history's most dramatic examples of mass psychogenic illness, a form of mass hysteria. In a community shattered by stress and shared belief, the physical body can manifest the mind's deepest anxieties. The dancing was a contagious expression of pure, unconscious distress, a somatic cry for help from a population that had no other outlet. It was a perfect storm of physiological, psychological, and social factors converging into a single, terrifying spectacle. What does it say about the human mind that under enough pressure, it can command the body to dance itself to death? While a city danced itself to exhaustion, a far more violent and sudden event was preparing to scar the earth. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, in the remote skies over Siberia, a fireball brighter than the sun blazed across the heavens. Moments later, a cataclysmic explosion ripped through the air above the Podkamennaya Tunguska River. unleashing a shockwave so immense it flattened an estimated 80 million trees across 2,150 square kilometers. The force was equivalent to 10 to 15 million tons of TNT, hundreds of times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The ground shook with the violence of an earthquake, and the atmospheric disturbance was recorded by barometers as far away as England. For those closest to the event, the experience was apocalyptic. Reindeer herders were thrown from their feet and their tents were blown away, while the intense heat burned their skin and set the forest ablaze. The sky glowed with strange, silvery nights for weeks afterward, a phenomenon witnessed across Europe and Asia that allowed people to read newspapers outdoors at midnight. Yet, when the first scientific expedition managed to reach the incredibly remote site 19 years later, they found a scene of utter devastation with a startling void at its center. There was no crater. The epicenter of the most powerful impact event in recorded human history showed only stripped, scorched trees radiating outward from a central point, all still standing upright like a forest of giant matchsticks. How could something with the power to obliterate a major city leave no trace of itself in the ground? The leading scientific explanation is a cosmic airburst. A stony meteoroid, roughly the size of a 20-story building, is thought to have entered Earth's atmosphere at tens of thousands of miles per hour. The incredible pressure and heat of its descent caused it to explode in the sky about 3 to 6 miles above the surface. This superheated blast of gas and energy is what hammered the forest below, creating the vast devastation without ever touching the Earth. Later expeditions found the smoking gun, tiny microscopic spheres of silicate and magnetite embedded in the soil, the condensed remains of the vaporized space rock. Still, the lack of a definitive fragment has allowed other, more speculative ideas to persist. Could it have been a small piece of a comet composed mostly of ice which would have completely vaporized? Some have even proposed the far-fetched notion of a miniature black hole passing through the Earth, or the wreckage of an alien spacecraft suffering a catastrophic failure. The sheer power and bizarre nature of the Tunguska event ensure its place not just in scientific journals, but in the realm of profound mystery. It serves as a sobering reminder of our planet's vulnerability, a single, silent rock from the depths of space capable of unleashing planetary-scale energy without leaving a calling card. While the Tunguska event scarred a landscape, another mystery is contained entirely within the fragile pages of a book. In a vault at Yale University lies the Voynich manuscript, a codex that has defied understanding for centuries. Its 240 vellum pages are filled from edge to edge with an unknown script, a flowing handwriting that uses characters seen nowhere else on Earth. This text accompanies illustrations that are just as baffling. There are detailed drawings of plants that do not exist, their roots and leaves unlike any known botany. Fold-out pages reveal intricate astronomical charts showing unknown constellations and celestial bodies. Perhaps the most enigmatic section depicts numerous nude women bathing in interconnected, elaborate pools and tubes of a vibrant green liquid, a scene that looks both biological and architectural. The book's known history begins in the early 15th century, based on carbon dating of the vellum. It likely originated in Renaissance Italy, and it passed through the hands of various alchemists and emperors, including Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who reportedly purchased it for 600 gold ducats, a kingly sum. Its modern name comes from Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who acquired it in 1912 and brought it to public attention. Since then, it has been the ultimate puzzle for cryptographers. The finest codebreakers from both world wars, including teams from the United States National Security Agency, have applied their skills to its text. They have all failed. The script shows a statistical structure similar to a real language, with patterns of word length and repetition that suggest it is not random gibberish, yet it resists every known method of decryption. This relentless failure has spawned countless theories about its purpose. Perhaps it is an elaborate and expensive hoax created to dupe a wealthy patron like Rudolph II. Maybe it is a secret alchemical text with its strange plants and green baths representing coded chemical processes. Some have proposed it was written by the brilliant 13th century friar Roger Bacon, centuries before the vellum was even made, detailing advanced knowledge he dared not write plainly. More recent studies using artificial intelligence have entered the fray. One analysis suggested the text's patterns could point to encoded Hebrew, while another proposed it was a form of Old Turkish. Yet these high-tech proposals remain controversial and unproven, as no one has produced a coherent, verifiable translation. The Voynich manuscript is a locked door with no key, a beautiful, maddening artifact that whispers of a secret we have not yet learned how to hear. It stands as a monument to the limits of our knowledge, proving that some messages from the past are delivered in a language we simply cannot speak. While a book of unreadable text taunts us, another ancient object speaks a language of pure mechanics we are only just beginning to understand. At the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, off the coast of the Greek island Antikythera, a storm in the year 1901 forced a crew of sponge divers to take shelter. While waiting for the weather to clear, they decided to explore the depths. What they found was not sponges, but the ghost of a Roman-era shipwreck, its wooden hull long gone, leaving a scattered cargo of marble and bronze statues. Among these treasures, they recovered a lump of corroded, greenish metal that seemed less impressive than the sculptures. It was only when the lump broke apart that archaeologists saw the truth. Inside were the remains of a complex device, a system of interlocking bronze gears, precisely cut and mounted within a wooden frame. They had found the Antikythera mechanism. For decades, this corroded clockwork baffled every expert who examined it. Nothing like it had ever been found from the ancient world. Its complexity was so anachronistic that some scholars initially dismissed it as a modern object that had fallen into the wreck. The real breakthrough came almost a century later with the advent of advanced imaging technology. High-resolution X-rays and computed tomography scans finally peered through the centuries of corrosion, revealing the device's inner workings in stunning detail. They exposed a labyrinth of at least 30 intermeshing gears, some with teeth so tiny they were barely a millimeter long. Inscriptions previously invisible were found to be a detailed user manual explaining the celestial cycles the machine was built to calculate. This was not a simple clock, it was an analog computer of astonishing sophistication. By turning a hand crank on the side, the user could set a date and the mechanism would predict the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and the 5 known planets. It modeled the irregular orbit of the Moon, it predicted lunar and solar eclipses decades in advance, and it even tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. The entire device was a miniature mechanical model of the known solar system, a cosmic engine powered by human hands. The implications are staggering. This single artifact rewrites our understanding of ancient Greek science and engineering. It proves that the theoretical knowledge of thinkers like Archimedes and Hipparchus was not just abstract philosophy. It was translated into intricate physical technology. The level of precision machining required for its gears would not be seen again until the mechanical clocks of 18th century Europe. Who built this marvel and for what purpose? Was it a teaching tool for a wealthy patron, a navigational aid for a ship's captain, or a demonstration of pure genius by a master artisan? The Antikythera mechanism stands as a haunting relic of a technological peak that was completely lost. It whispers of an alternate history where the scientific revolution could have begun not in the 1600s, but more than a millennium earlier. How many other gears of progress have been lost to the silent depths of time? Deep within a Russian palace, a room made of sunlight stood as a testament to human artistry. This was the Amber Room, a chamber where the walls themselves were priceless treasure. Crafted in the early 18th century for the King of Prussia, its panels were a mosaic of over 6 tons of amber, a fossilized tree resin that glowed with the warmth of honey and gold. This amber was intricately carved, backed with gold leaf, and fitted with glittering mirrors, creating a space so radiant it was often called the eighth wonder of the world. The Prussian monarch, Frederick William I, later gifted this masterpiece to Peter the Great of Russia as a grand gesture of diplomacy. It was painstakingly installed in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg, where it remained for more than 2 centuries, a breathtaking symbol of imperial opulence that left every visitor in awe. Then came the war. In 1941, as Nazi forces advanced deep into Soviet territory, the curators at the Catherine Palace made a desperate attempt to save the room. They tried to dismantle the panels, but the ancient amber began to crumble at the touch. Fearing its total destruction, they made a heartbreaking decision. They hid the panels behind mundane wallpaper, hoping to deceive the invaders. The ruse failed. German soldiers, following a direct order from the High Command, discovered the treasure. They carefully, methodically took the entire room apart, packed the panels into 27 crates, and shipped them to Königsberg Castle in East Prussia, modern-day Kaliningrad. There, the amber room was reassembled and put on display as a trophy of the Third Reich. For a few years, it was seen by the public, a final, glittering chapter in its known history. But as the war reached its fiery end in 1945, and the Soviet Red Army closed in on Königsberg, the room vanished from all records. The castle was heavily bombed and burned, and when the smoke cleared, the amber room was gone. Its fate is one of the greatest unsolved treasure hunts of the modern era. The most accepted theory is that it was destroyed in the Allied bombardment, its delicate panels reduced to ash and smoke. Yet, no significant traces of burned amber or molten gold were ever found in the castle ruins. This absence fuels the hope that it was hidden instead. Perhaps the crates were loaded onto a ship like the steamer Wilhelm Gustloff, which was sunk by a Soviet submarine, taking its cargo to the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Or maybe the panels were sealed in a secret underground bunker or a forgotten salt mine, waiting to be rediscovered. Over the decades, countless searches have been launched, following cryptic clues and eyewitness accounts, but every lead has evaporated into dead ends. The only version of the amber room that exists today is a magnificent reconstruction, completed in 2003 at the Catherine Palace after decades of work by Russian craftsmen. It is a beautiful replica, but it is also a permanent reminder of the original's ghostly absence. Where did those 6 tons of solidified light ultimately go? The answer remains locked away, perhaps forever, a glittering phantom haunting the shadows of history. Far from the silent archives of lost books and sunken ships, one region of the ocean has become a global byword for the unexplained. The Bermuda Triangle, a vast stretch of water between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, is a place where the map seems to fold in on itself, swallowing vessels and planes into legend. Its infamy was cemented on a routine afternoon in December 1945. Flight 19, a squadron of 5 United States Navy Avenger torpedo bombers, took off from Fort Lauderdale on a standard training mission. The flight leader, an experienced instructor, was heard over the radio reporting that his compasses had stopped working. He was disoriented, stating that everything looked wrong, even the ocean. The weather was turning foul, and as dusk fell, his final transmissions grew more frantic. "We cannot be sure of any direction," he said. "Everything is wrong. Even the sea doesn't look as it should." Then, silence. A massive sea and air search was launched, involving hundreds of ships and aircraft. Not a single piece of wreckage, no life rafts, and no bodies from the 5 bombers or their 14 crew members were ever found. In a tragic twist, one of the search and rescue planes, a Martin Mariner flying boat with 13 men aboard, also vanished without a trace that same evening. The official Navy report could only conclude that the cause was unknown, a verdict that ignited the public imagination. the triangle's ledger of loss grew with other strange cases like the SS Marine Sulphur Queen. In 1963, this large tanker carrying molten sulfur vanished with its entire 39-man crew. A lone life jacket was found, but the ship itself had been utterly consumed by the sea. The legend of a supernatural vortex was born, fed by stories of crews vanishing from perfectly sound ships and planes disappearing from calm skies. Yet when we pull back the curtain of myth, a different, more scientific picture emerges. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the most heavily traveled shipping lanes and flight paths in the world. Statistically, when you account for this immense traffic and the region's notoriously violent and sudden weather, the percentage of disappearances is not remarkably high. The Gulf Stream, a powerful, warm ocean current that runs through the area, can quickly erase all evidence of a disaster, sweeping wreckage far away. Human error remains the most common culprit. In the case of Flight 19, the most likely scenario is that the flight leader simply became lost over featureless ocean after his compasses failed, a common issue in that era. With night falling and storms moving in, the planes would have run out of fuel and crashed into the raging sea. The Martin Mariner that vanished while searching for them was known as a flying gas tank, prone to catastrophic explosions from fuel vapors. More exotic theories point to the ocean floor itself. Vast reservoirs of methane hydrates, frozen deposits of natural gas, are known to exist in the region. If a sudden landslide or temperature change released this gas, it could theoretically bubble up to the surface, decreasing the water's density so drastically that a ship would lose buoyancy and sink in moments. The same methane plume rising into the air could also cause an aircraft's engines to stall or create a powerful explosion. Despite the logical explanations, the myth endures because it speaks to a primal fear, the terror of being erased without a reason, of vanishing into a blue void that offers no answers. The Bermuda Triangle is less a geographic anomaly and more a cultural one, a story we tell about the unforgiving power of nature and our own fragile place within it. It is a mystery not of the deep, but of the human need to find pattern and purpose even in random tragedy. Some mysteries scream from the pages of history, while others arrive as a faint, unshakable whisper in the ear. For a small percentage of people in the tranquil town of Taos, New Mexico, and in other isolated pockets around the world, life is accompanied by a constant, low-frequency hum. It is not a sound that everyone can perceive, but for those who can, it is a relentless presence. They describe it as a distant diesel engine idling, a steady drone that vibrates through their very bones, a noise that is most perceptible in the quiet of the night. This is the Taos hum, an auditory ghost that torments its hearers, leading to sleepless nights, crippling headaches, and a profound sense of isolation. Imagine trying to concentrate on work or fall asleep while a faint, vibrating buzz permeates your home, a sound you cannot escape because it seems to be coming from inside your own head. The frustration is immense, and it has driven hearers to desperate measures, soundproofing their bedrooms or even moving away in search of silence, only to sometimes find the hum has followed them. The phenomenon gained such notoriety in the 1990s that the United States Congress actually commissioned a team of scientists from some of the nation's top research institutions to investigate. They arrived in Taos with sensitive microphones and seismic monitors, determined to pin down the source of this pervasive noise, yet after an exhaustive study, they left baffled. Their sophisticated equipment detected nothing out of the ordinary. The hum was real to the people, but it was completely invisible to science. This fundamental disconnect is the core of the mystery. How can a sound be so physically palpable to one group and utterly silent to another? The leading theories attempt to bridge this gap, but each one has its shortcomings. One line of inquiry points to external, industrial sources. Perhaps the hum is the cumulative result of massive power lines, generating a low-frequency electromagnetic field that only some people are sensitive to. Maybe it originates from distant machinery, pumping stations, or natural gas pipelines, their vibrations traveling for miles through the ground and air. Another compelling idea involves geology, suggesting that the hum could be the sound of slow, deep seismic activity, the Earth itself groaning under immense pressure. Yet, none of these sources have ever been conclusively linked to the specific experiences reported by the hearers. The most personal and controversial theory shifts the focus inward, proposing that the hum is not an external sound at all. It could be a spontaneous autocaustic emission, a sound generated by the inner ear itself. In a small number of people, the cochlea can sometimes act like a tiny speaker, producing its own faint tones that only the hearer can perceive. This would explain why microphones cannot pick it up and why the sound seems to follow a person everywhere they go. But if this is the case, why does it only affect people in specific geographic locations? The debate over the hum's origin has inevitably divided communities. Those who hear it feel dismissed and marginalized, told by doctors and officials that the problem is all in their heads, while those who cannot hear it often grow skeptical of the complaints. The Tao's hum and other similar phenomena around the globe is more than just a sonic puzzle. It is a profound lesson in perception, a reminder that our experience of reality is deeply personal and not always shared. It forces us to question what is real and to consider the possibility that some of the world's greatest enigmas are not written in stone or lost at sea, but are carried quietly within us. While a quiet hum torments a few on Earth, a single, deafening shout from the cosmos once echoed through a radio telescope. On a quiet August evening in 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was performing its routine scan of the sky, methodically listening to the radio whispers of the universe. The data was printed out on long, continuous sheets of paper, columns of letters and numbers representing the signal strength from deep space, most of it just the faint, predictable hiss of cosmic background noise. A few days later, volunteer astronomer Jerry R. Amon was reviewing the printout when his eye caught something extraordinary. In the middle of a sea of mundane characters was a sequence of 6 alphanumeric codes, 6EQUJ5, that represented a signal so powerful it broke the scale. It was a narrowband radio signal, precisely the kind scientists had predicted an intelligent civilization would use to broadcast its existence across the interstellar void. Stunned by the intensity and perfection of the reading, Amon took his red pen, circled the sequence, and wrote one word in the margin. Wow! That single, exuberant exclamation gave the signal its immortal name. The wow signal was not a long message. It lasted for exactly 72 seconds, the precise length of time the Big Ear telescope could focus on any single point in the sky as the Earth rotated. It came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, near a star group known as Chi Sagittarii. It was loud, clean, and then it was gone. The very characteristics that made it so exciting also made it maddening. It was a perfect candidate for an artificial signal, a cosmic hello that arrived and then vanished without a trace. The hunt for a repeat began immediately. Astronomers pointed every available telescope, including the mighty Big Ear itself, back toward that same spot in the sky. They listened for months, then years. They scanned that region hundreds of times, but the signal never returned. It was a one-time event, a solitary note in an otherwise silent symphony. This singular nature is the heart of the mystery. If it was a message from an alien civilization, why was it only sent once? The search for a natural explanation has been just as frustrating. Some have proposed it was a signal reflected off a piece of space debris, like a passing satellite or a spent rocket booster. The problem is that human-made satellites transmit on frequencies that are illegal for astronomical use, and the WOW signal was detected on a protected frequency band reserved exclusively for listening to the cosmos. Another theory suggested it was the hydrogen cloud of a comet that happened to pass through the telescope's view. Decades later, 2 comets were indeed identified in the general area, but their known positions did not align perfectly with the signal's precise point of origin, and comets had never been known to produce such a strong, focused radio burst. Every proposed solution seems to have a flaw, a reason why it does not quite fit the perfect profile of that 72-second event. The WOW signal remains the most compelling and frustrating piece of evidence in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. It is a siren song from the depths of space that we heard only once, a tantalizing hint that we might not be alone, leaving us forever to wonder who or what might have been saying hello. A camera found among the scattered gear held the last images of 9 smiling faces. These experienced Russian hikers from the Ural Polytechnical Institute were on a winter trek in February 1959, a journey that should have been a testament to their skill. Instead, they became the core of one of the most chilling and perplexing tragedies in modern history. The search party found their tent on the eastern slope of CROATOAN, a name that translates ominously as Dead Mountain. The scene was one of utter chaos and profound contradiction. The tent was cut open from the inside, as if its occupants had torn their way out in a frantic rush. Their boots, warm coats, and most of their supplies were left neatly inside. The hiker's trail led away from the campsite, a set of footprints in the deep snow made by people who were either barefoot or wearing only socks, despite the sub-zero temperatures that could freeze a person in minutes. The bodies were discovered hundreds of meters away, scattered in small groups. The first 2 were found near the remains of a small fire, dressed only in their underwear. 3 more were located between the fire and the tent, frozen in postures that suggested they were trying to crawl back to camp. The final 4 bodies were not uncovered until months later, under a deep layer of snow in a ravine, and it was these hikers that deepened the mystery to its horrifying core. One had a fractured skull, another had massive chest fractures, yet neither showed any external wounds, as if they had been crushed by an immense, invisible pressure. One young woman was missing her tongue. The official inquest, after a lengthy investigation, could only conclude that the group had met their end due to a compelling natural force, a vague term that solved nothing and invited endless speculation. The avalanche theory is a persistent one, suggesting a small slab of snow hit the tent, causing panic and a rushed escape. But experienced mountaineers would likely have dug themselves out, not fled half-dressed into certain death. The terrain was also not steep enough for a major avalanche, and no evidence of one was found. The infrasound theory proposes that unique wind patterns over the mountain created low-frequency sound waves, inaudible to the human ear but capable of inducing feelings of terror and panic, literally scaring the hikers out of their minds and into the frozen wilderness. Yet, what force then caused the horrific internal injuries to the last 4? This has fueled more exotic ideas, from a secret military test with concussive weapons to a confrontation with a Yeti or even an attack by a UFO. The missing tongue, a gruesome detail, was later explained by natural decomposition and scavenging animals, but it has become a permanent part of the legend. Photographs from their camera show nothing but ordinary hiking moments right up until the end. Maps of their intended route reveal no obvious danger. Every theory, from the scientific to the speculative, seems to unravel when held against the complete picture. Why would they cut their way out of their only shelter? What terrifying sight or sound could make them abandon all survival instinct? The Dyatlov Pass incident is a true crime scene written in snow and ice, a puzzle where every piece seems to belong to a different game, leaving us to wonder what kind of natural force leaves no trace but 9 broken bodies. A completely different kind of power, not of the cosmos but of chemistry, may have been harnessed in an ancient workshop. In the basement of the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad sits a collection of the most unassuming objects, simple clay pots that tell a story far more complex than their humble appearance suggests. Each one is about the size of a man's fist, sealed with an asphalt plug. Through this plug runs an iron rod suspended inside a rolled copper cylinder. They were discovered in the 1930s at a site near Baghdad, and they date back to the Parthian period, roughly 2,000 years ago. To a modern eye, the arrangement is uncannily familiar. It looks like the components of a simple battery. The theory, first proposed by German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, is as elegant as it is revolutionary. If this jar were filled with an acidic liquid, something as common as vinegar or grape juice, the chemical reaction between the electrolyte and the two dissimilar metals would create a small electrical potential. A single cell might only produce about 1 volt, but by linking several together in a series, an ancient artisan could have generated a noticeable and usable electric current. So what would this power have been used for? The most compelling application is electroplating. Imagine a skilled craftsperson wanting to gild a silver statue with a thin, beautiful layer of gold. With a weak electrical current, they could suspend the statue in a gold salt solution and use these primitive cells to bond the gold particles directly onto the surface, a process far more efficient and less wasteful than traditional mercury gilding. Other theories suggest a more mystical or medical use. Perhaps the gentle tingle of electricity was employed in healing rituals, a sensation that would have seemed magical to people who had no concept of the underlying science. The very idea forces us to reconsider the technological landscape of the ancient world, hinting at pockets of practical knowledge that were never recorded in surviving texts. Yet, for every voice championing the Baghdad battery, there is a chorus of skeptics. The mainstream archaeological view offers a much more mundane explanation. These jars, they argue, were simply secure containers for storing precious religious scrolls. The iron rod and copper cylinder could have been the core around which a sheet of papyrus or parchment was rolled, and the asphalt seal would have protected the sacred text from moisture and insects. This explanation fits neatly with known practices, requiring no leap into speculative technology. The debate ultimately hinges on a profound absence of context. No wires have ever been found with these jars. No electroplated objects from that specific time and place have been conclusively linked to an electrochemical process. The artifacts themselves are silent, their true purpose lost to the centuries. Are we seeing a brilliant, forgotten invention, a spark of genius that flickered out without igniting a wider technological revolution? Or are we guilty of projecting our own modern understanding onto a simple storage vessel, seeing a battery only because we know what one looks like? The Baghdad battery remains a powerful symbol of a fundamental question. How much did our ancestors truly know, and how much of that knowledge has simply vanished from our collective memory? High on the arid plateaus of southern Peru, the desert floor becomes a colossal canvas. Etched into the stark landscape are the Nazca lines, hundreds of massive geoglyphs so vast they defy comprehension from the ground. Created by the ancient Nazca culture between 500 BCE and 500 CE, these drawings depict a stunning menagerie, a hummingbird with wings outstretched, a sinuous monkey with a coiled tail, a massive spider, and even a strange humanoid figure nicknamed the astronaut. Some of these creations stretch over 1,200 feet in length, their forms so perfectly proportioned that they can only be truly appreciated from the sky. The method of their construction was deceptively simple, yet required incredible precision. The Nazca people meticulously removed the top layer of dark, sun-baked pebbles to expose the lighter, sandy soil beneath. This created a stark visual contrast, and the lines have been preserved for over 2,000 years by one of the driest and most windless climates on Earth. It is as if the desert itself decided to hold its breath to keep these secrets. But why would a people with no capacity for flight create art meant to be seen from the air? This is the central, haunting question that has fueled decades of speculation. The most enduring theory, championed by German mathematician Maria Reich, who dedicated her life to their study, posits that the lines formed a gigantic astronomical calendar. She believed the giant animal figures represented constellations, and the long, straight lines tracked the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, serving as a celestial guide for planting and harvesting in an unforgiving environment. Other researchers see a deeply religious purpose. Water was the most precious and elusive resource for the Nazca, and many of the lines lead directly to ancient aquifers. Perhaps these pathways were ceremonial routes walked by priests during rituals to summon life-giving water from the gods. The figures themselves might have been offerings to powerful deities, giant prayers for rain etched permanently into the earth. The most famous, if fringe, theory was popularized in the 1960s, suggesting the lines were landing strips or navigational markers for extraterrestrial visitors. While this captures the imagination, archaeologists point out that the desert surface is too soft to support the weight of any aircraft, and the designs hold profound cultural meaning that connects them directly to Nazca mythology and spiritual beliefs, not to alien technology. The true significance of the lines likely lies in a combination of these ideas, a complex interplay of astronomy, religion, and a desperate need to control the elements. They are a testament to a culture that saw its entire world, its survival and its cosmology on a grand panoramic scale. They did not need to fly to see their work, they simply needed to believe their gods were watching from above. What does it say about humanity that we feel compelled to leave such immense, permanent marks upon the world, messages not for our neighbors but for the heavens themselves? While the Nazca lines were giant messages for the heavens, a very different kind of mark was being left in the foggy alleyways of Victorian London. The autumn of 1888 in the Whitechapel district was a season of pure terror. This was a world of crushing poverty where narrow, gas-lit streets were choked with thick industrial fog and the desperate residents who called them home. It was here that an unseen predator began targeting some of society's most vulnerable women, female prostitutes whose lives were already precarious. The killer, who would soon be christened Jack the Ripper in a series of taunting letters to the press, did not just murder his victims. He mutilated them with a surgical precision that suggested a chilling familiarity with human anatomy, removing specific organs in a manner that hinted at more than just rage. The police, using the rudimentary forensic methods of the era, were utterly outmatched. They had no fingerprint databases, no understanding of blood spatter, and a force completely unprepared for the brutality of a modern serial killer. They collected witness statements that led nowhere and trudged through the same foggy labyrinth night after night, always one step behind a ghost. The public's imagination, fueled by sensationalist newspapers, ran wild, and the list of suspects grew to include a bizarre and sprawling cast of characters. Was it Aaron Kosminski, a poor Polish immigrant barber who was later committed to an asylum? Could it have been the controversial painter Walter Sickert, whose own dark artwork some believe contain hidden clues? The most sensational theories even pointed a finger at members of the British royal family, suggesting a high-level cover-up to conceal a scandalous secret. From doctors and butchers to lawyers and merchants, almost every profession and social class was scrutinized. Yet, for all the accusations, not a single suspect was ever definitively linked to the crimes. The case files are filled with maybes and what-ifs, a maze of dead ends that has only grown more tangled with time. The true identity of Jack the Ripper is not just a single mystery, but the birthplace of the modern serial killer mythos. He was a phantom who used the anonymity of the city itself as his cloak, his legend forged in the ink of the penny dreadfuls and the collective fear of a populace that realized the monster was not in the shadows but was the shadows. Why has this one name endured when so many other killers have been forgotten? Perhaps because he represents the ultimate unresolved chord, a story of injustice that refuses to fade, proving that sometimes the most terrifying question is not who did it, but how they simply vanished into the cold, uncaring night. From the shadowy anonymity of a serial killer, we turn to a relic that presents the ultimate claimed identity. Preserved in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, lies a piece of linen measuring approximately 14 feet long by 3.5 feet wide. This is the Shroud of Turin, and it bears the faint, straw-colored imprint of a man, front and back, as if a body had been laid lengthwise on one half and the other folded over the top. The image is a photographic negative, a concept unknown in the medieval world, showing a bearded man with long hair, his body marked by what appear to be wounds from a crown of thorns, a spear thrust in the side, and lash marks across the back, all consistent with the biblical account of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Its known history begins in the 1350s in Liéry, France, when a knight displayed it as the true burial shroud of Christ. For centuries, it has been an object of intense veneration and equally intense scientific scrutiny. The central, fiery debate was ignited in 1988 when the Vatican permitted a radiocarbon dating test. Small samples from a corner of the shroud were sent to 3 independent laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Tucson. The results, published to global attention, dated the linen to between 1260 and 1390, squarely in the medieval period. This seemed to deliver a definitive verdict: the shroud was a brilliant but human forgery. Yet the story did not end there. Critics of the carbon dating immediately raised compelling objections. They argued that the sample taken came from a corner that had been handled for centuries, potentially contaminated by oils from human hands, smoke from a church fire in 1532 that damaged the cloth, and even microbial growth. More significantly, some textile experts proposed that the sampled area was not part of the original shroud, but a nearly invisible medieval repair, a patch woven in to reinforce the damaged edge. If this were true, the carbon dating would only be testing the age of the repair thread, not the shroud itself. This controversy over its age is matched by the profound mystery of the image itself. How was it made? The image resides only on the very topmost microfibers of the linen threads, with no penetration into the weave beneath, and there is no pigment, no binder, no substance applied to the cloth. It is not a painting. The coloration appears to be a chemical change, a dehydration and oxidation of the cellulose fibers, as if the cloth was lightly scorched. Attempts to replicate the image using medieval techniques have failed to capture its unique three-dimensional, photonegative quality. One scientific theory suggests a chemical reaction between ammonia vapors from a corpse and the aloes and myrrh used in ancient burial rites. The most theologically charged and scientifically speculative hypothesis is that the image was formed in a fraction of a second by a sudden, intense burst of radiant energy, a flash of light from the body itself at the moment of resurrection. This would explain why the image has no directionality, unlike a painted or rubbed-on substance, and why it encodes three-dimensional data about the body it covered. Skeptics counter with the possibility of an unknown, lost medieval art form, perhaps using a bas-relief statue and sunlight to create a primitive photograph centuries before the invention of the camera. The debate over the Shroud of Turin is a perfect collision of faith and science, a single piece of cloth that seems to ask the most fundamental questions. Is it the most sublime holy relic, a divine self-portrait etched by a miracle? Or is it the most ingenious and enduring hoax in human history, a masterpiece of deception whose method we have yet to fully unravel? The answers you find may depend less on the evidence and more on what you are prepared to believe. Across the English Channel, another testament to immense, forgotten effort stands in silent rows. In the French countryside of Brittany, the Carnac stones present a puzzle of staggering scale. Over 3,000 prehistoric standing stones march across the landscape in eerie, parallel lines, a megalithic army frozen in time. These are not randomly placed boulders, but a meticulously arranged complex erected by a pre-Celtic people over a 1,000-year period, beginning around 4500 BCE. The sheer physical labor involved is almost incomprehensible. Imagine entire communities with only stone tools and wooden rollers, moving granite blocks weighing several tons each, digging them into the earth with a precision that has kept them standing for more than 6,000 years. The site is divided into three major groups, each a forest of stone. The Roanoke alignments feature nearly 1,100 stones in 11 converging rows. Further east, the Camarillo alignments continue the pattern with even taller monoliths. Finally, the Colescan group completes the grand design with 540 stones arranged in 13 straight lines. Walking among them, you are dwarfed not just by their size, but by the sheer willpower it took to create them. So what was the purpose of this colossal undertaking? The leading theory suggests an ancient astronomical observatory. The alignments are not random. Specific stones seem to mark the extreme rising and setting points of the sun and moon throughout the year. For a Neolithic farming society, predicting the solstices and equinoxes was a matter of survival, dictating when to plant and when to harvest. This was not just science, it was sacred, a way of aligning human life with the cosmic order. Other archaeologists see a more terrestrial purpose. The lines could have been a territorial marker, a permanent, undeniable statement of a tribe's land and power, visible for miles. Or perhaps this was a vast, open-air cathedral dedicated to ancestor worship. The nearby dolmens, which are stone table tombs, and tumuli, which are burial mounds, support the idea that this was a landscape of the dead, a place where the living communicated with the spirits of their lineage. A more speculative idea proposes the stones functioned as a primitive earthquake detector. The theory suggests that the carefully balanced stones would vibrate or even topple in response to distant seismic activity, providing an early warning system for the community. Yet, no single explanation feels complete. An observatory does not explain every curious angle. A territorial marker seems too simple for such a complex, spiritually charged site. The truth likely wove all these purposes together. The Karnak stones are a reminder that for our ancient ancestors, the world was not divided into separate boxes labeled science, religion, and society. It was all one interconnected whole, and they built monuments to reflect that profound unity. Why would a civilization pour so many generations of effort into this single project? The answer is written in granite, in a language we are still struggling to read. While ancient stones stood as silent monuments, another secret was buried inside a dark Judean cave, waiting on a different kind of tablet. In 1952, archaeologists exploring a cave near the ruins of Qumran made their most peculiar discovery yet. Among the fragile, famous Dead Sea Scrolls of parchment and papyrus was something that should not have survived, a scroll made entirely of copper. It was so heavily oxidized and brittle that it could not be unrolled without shattering into pieces. For 6 years, scholars debated how to access its secrets, finally deciding to carefully cut it open along its seams, slicing the metal like a book to reveal the text hammered into its inner surface. They did not find psalms or prophecies. Instead, they found a treasure map. The copper scroll, as it became known, is a stark, practical inventory written in a form of Hebrew distinct from the other scrolls. It lists 64 different caches of treasure, itemizing absolutely staggering quantities, including over 4,600 talents of gold and silver, along with precious incense and vessels. The instructions are frustratingly direct yet cryptic. One entry might read, "In the cistern which is under the wall of the eastern side, in the hole looking north, there is a copy of this document with its explanation and measurements." Another simply states, "In the great drain of the temple court, dig 7 cubits." It is a maddeningly literal guide to a fortune that would be worth billions today, scattered across the wilderness. The central, burning question is whether this treasure was ever real. Many scholars believe it describes the vast wealth of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, hidden by priests just before the Roman legions sacked and destroyed the city in 70 CE. The scroll could be a desperate attempt to preserve the sacred treasury from the invading army, a list meant for a future generation that would reclaim their heritage. Yet the sheer amounts described are so immense, so fantastical, that others argue it must be symbolic, a record of a legendary treasure from Jewish lore, or perhaps even the fictional hoard of a sect dreaming of a restored kingdom. This debate has fueled a real-world treasure hunt for decades. Countless expeditions armed with the scroll's translated clues have scoured wadis, cisterns, and ruins across the Judean desert. They have dug at the base of specific cliffs and searched inside ancient aqueducts, but not a single bar of gold or silver has ever been found. The land does not match the map, or perhaps the landmarks have simply vanished after 2,000 years. This complete lack of success has led to two other compelling theories. Perhaps the treasure was found long ago, maybe by the Romans who tortured prisoners for information, or by a lucky Bedouin shepherd centuries later, the wealth dispersed and its story forgotten. Or perhaps the greatest treasure was the copper scroll itself, a magnificent and elaborate hoax that has sent generations on a futile quest. Why go to the immense trouble of inscribing a durable metal scroll with such precise, false information? We may never know. The copper scroll is a unique paradox, a document that feels too practical to be a myth and too mythical to be real. It is a ghost of a fortune, a whisper of unimaginable wealth that continues to tempt us with the possibility that somewhere, buried under the shifting sands, a king's ransom still waits. Their silent, stone gazes have watched over a remote Pacific island for centuries. The moai of Easter Island are a breathtaking sight, nearly 900 monolithic human figures carved from volcanic tuff by the Rapa Nui people between 1250 and 1500 CE. These colossal heads, many with full torsos, stand with their backs to the sea, their solemn expressions facing inland as if guarding the communities they represented. The average moai stands an imposing 13 feet tall and weighs a staggering 14 tons, but the ambition of their creators did not stop there. In the main quarry of Roanoke, an unfinished giant known as El Gigant lies still attached to the bedrock. It is 69 feet long and would have weighed an estimated 270 tons if completed, a testament to a scale of ambition that is almost incomprehensible. The central, enduring mystery is not who made them, but how they moved them. How did a society without wheels, metal tools, or draft animals transport these multi-ton statues for miles across rugged terrain and then stand them upright on massive stone platforms called ahu? For a long time, the dominant theory was that they were dragged horizontally on log rollers, a method that would have required vast amounts of timber and enormous manpower. But a more dynamic idea emerged, one rooted in local oral tradition. This theory suggests the statues were not dragged but walked. In this method, teams of people would have used ropes to rock a moai from side to side, pivoting it on its base and inching it forward in a controlled, upright wobble. Modern experimental archaeology has tested both ideas. One team successfully moved a concrete replica by rocking it with just 3 teams of people and ropes, a method that felt eerily like bringing the stone giant to life. Other experiments, however, suggest a combination of methods, using a sledge and lubricated tracks for longer distances. Each theory has its merits and its flaws, and the true method may have been a complex, lost art specific to the island's unique environment. This incredible effort, however, came at a cost. The prevailing narrative tells of a society that collapsed under the weight of its own ambition, recklessly cutting down the island's palm forests to create rollers and levers, which led to severe erosion, the loss of canoes for fishing, and ultimately famine and warfare. Yet, recent archaeological findings complicate this story, suggesting the Rapa Nui people were remarkably resilient and adapted in creative ways long after deforestation. The true cause of their societal decline may be a more tragic combination of factors, including the arrival of European diseases and slave raiding. the Moai themselves fell, toppled in periods of conflict. The mystery of their journey is more than an engineering puzzle. It is a story of a people's profound connection to their ancestors, for the statues were not gods, but representations of revered lineage chiefs, their supernatural power or mana, intended to protect and nourish the living. Why would a civilization pour so much of its energy and resources into such a monumental task? The silent Moai hold the answer, a secret carved in stone about human ambition, resilience, and our eternal drive to leave a mark that will outlast us all. Fear could be mailed in an envelope, and in the autumn of 1969, the residents of the San Francisco Bay Area learned this terrifying truth. A serial killer who would name himself the Zodiac began a campaign of murder and psychological warfare, targeting young couples in isolated lovers' lanes and then boasting about his crimes to the newspapers. His first confirmed attack occurred on December 20, 1968, but the terror truly began on the night of July 4, 1969. Darlene Ferrin and Mike Majau were sitting in a car in Vallejo when a man approached, shone a bright flashlight into their eyes, and then opened fire without a word. Majau survived despite being shot multiple times and would later provide a description. Just 2 months later, on a Saturday night near Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac struck again with a chilling new method. He approached Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, who were picnicking, armed with a gun and a knife. He was wearing a bizarre, black executioner's hood with a crossed circle symbol stitched on the chest. He tied them up and then stabbed them both repeatedly. Before leaving, he used a felt tip pen to draw his symbol on their car door, along with the dates of his attacks. Cecilia Shepard died from her wounds. The killer's final known murder was of a San Francisco taxi driver, Paul Stein, shot in the head on a quiet street in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. This brazen act in the heart of the city demonstrated his audacity and his chilling ability to strike anywhere, but the murders were only the beginning of the horror. The Zodiac craved an audience. He began sending a series of taunting letters to local newspapers like the San Francisco Chronicle, demanding they be printed on the front page. He took credit for his crimes, provided details only the killer could know, and included cryptic ciphers to prove his identity and his intellectual superiority. His first cipher, a grid of symbols, was solved within a week by a schoolteacher and his wife. It read, in part, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." The message was a window into a depraved mind that saw murder as a sport. He threatened to shoot the tires of school buses and claimed to have a list of future victims, plunging the entire region into a state of panic. Police departments were flooded with thousands of tips, and parents kept their children home from school. The Zodiac's other ciphers, however, have proven far more resistant. His 340-character cipher, known as Z340, was only cracked in 2020, more than 50 years after it was sent. The message was another rant, complaining about being caught and his desire for paradise in the afterlife. Yet his final major cipher, the 408-character code, remains one of the most famous unsolved puzzles in the world, defying the efforts of professional codebreakers and amateur cryptographers for decades. The investigation into the Zodiac's identity became a sprawling maze of dead ends. Over the years, law enforcement has considered more than 2,500 persons of interest. Arthur Lee Allen was long considered the prime suspect, matching physical descriptions and possessing circumstantial evidence, but his fingerprints and handwriting did not match the killer's. Other suspects ranged from a troubled newspaper cartoonist to a man whose own family turned him in. The case remains officially open in multiple jurisdictions, but the trail has been cold for years. Why does the Zodiac killer continue to captivate us? He was not just a murderer, he was a storyteller who used the media to write his own terrifying legend. He turned his crimes into an interactive puzzle, inviting the public to participate in the fear. In the age of the internet, this has only intensified, with online communities dedicating countless hours to analyzing every letter, every suspect, and every unsolved code. The Zodiac created a perfect, unsolvable equation, a blend of random violence and meticulous self-promotion that ensures his name and his question mark will never fade. A map drawn on gazelle skin parchment seems to defy the very timeline of exploration. In 1513, Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis compiled a world map, a stunning piece of artistry that has become one of history's most contentious documents. The map shows the known world of its time with remarkable accuracy, detailing the western coasts of Europe and Africa and the eastern bulge of South America. But it is the landmass drawn far to the south that ignites a firestorm of debate, a continent that appears suspiciously similar to the coastline of Antarctica, a place that would not be officially discovered for another 3 centuries. Even more perplexing, this southern land is depicted not as it appears today, buried under miles of ice, but as a land with flowing rivers, mountains, and a coastline that, when compared to modern seismic surveys of the bedrock beneath the Antarctic ice, shows an uncanny resemblance. Piri Reis himself wrote notes in the margins, explaining that he was not the original source of this knowledge. He stated clearly that he had compiled his map from 20 older source charts, including some that dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, and even one that Christopher Columbus had used. This admission is the heart of the mystery. Could his map be a copy of a copy, preserving the geographical knowledge of a lost, advanced seafaring civilization that mapped the world during a prehistoric warm period when Antarctica's coasts were indeed ice-free? Proponents of this theory point to the precise longitudinal accuracy of the map, a feat that 16th century cartography should not have been able to achieve, and the startling correlation between the map's coastline and subglacial topography of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. They argue this is not a coincidence but a fossilized memory of an ancient world. Mainstream scholars, however, offer a series of more conventional explanations. They suggest the controversial landmass is simply a speculative addition, a cartographer's fancy representing the mythical Terra Australis Incognita, a vast southern continent that had been hypothesized since ancient Greek times. Another compelling argument is that the land is not Antarctica at all, but a distorted, repeated drawing of the eastern coast of South America, stretched and bent to fit the parchment. They note that many period maps included such speculative landforms, and that the correlation with Antarctica's true shape is, in their view, overstated and ignores the many clear inaccuracies present elsewhere on the map. The debate ultimately hinges on a single, tantalizing possibility. Is the Piri Reis map a miraculous relic, a piece of a forgotten global survey conducted by a culture whose name is lost to history? Or is it a beautiful and ambitious, yet ultimately flawed product of its own era, a patchwork of guesswork, myth, and emerging fact that we have simply misinterpreted? The gazelle skin holds its secret tightly, a silent testament to the enduring power of a single line drawn in ink and the worlds it can conjure. Their story sounds like a fable lifted straight from a fairy tale book. During the harvest season in 12th century England, in the village of Woolpit, reapers working the fields made a startling discovery. Hiding in a deep wolf pit, the trap that gave the village its name, were 2 terrified children. They were a boy and a girl, and they were unlike anyone the villagers had ever seen. Their skin had a distinct green tint, and they wore clothes made of an unfamiliar, strange fabric. Most baffling of all, they spoke a language that was completely unintelligible. The villagers took them in, but the children refused all the food they were offered. They seemed on the verge of starvation until someone presented them with raw, freshly picked broad beans. This was the only sustenance they would accept, and they ate the beans eagerly, still in their pods. The boy, however, never adapted. He grew increasingly sickly, sad, and soon died. The girl, on the other hand, slowly began to recover. Her green skin color gradually faded to a normal hue as she started to eat other foods. In time, she learned to speak English and was able to tell a most curious story about her origins. She explained that she and her brother came from a place called St. Martin's Land, a twilight realm where the sun never rose properly and the light was perpetually dim like the glow just before sunset. She described a world of permanent gloom separated from her own by a wide river. One day, while tending their father's cattle, they heard a loud, ringing sound. They were drawn toward the noise, found themselves in a cavern, and stumbled out into the blinding brightness of the English countryside where the villagers found them. This bizarre account was recorded by two respected chroniclers of the era, William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall, who treated it not as fantasy but as a genuine historical event. Modern scholars have attempted to untangle this strange tale with more grounded explanations. One compelling theory suggests the children were Flemish immigrants. During this period, King Henry II had brought Flemish weavers to England, but tensions often flared, leading to violence. The children may have been orphans from a nearby Flemish community, perhaps hiding in the forests after their parents were killed. Their greenish skin could be explained by a severe form of anemia, a condition where a lack of iron and other nutrients can give the skin a pale, greenish cast, especially after a long period of malnutrition. Another possibility is arsenic poisoning. If the children were exposed to arsenic, either from their environment or from contaminated copper, it can cause a condition called arsenical melanosis, which can darken or discolor the skin. Their refusal of all food except raw beans makes sense if they associated cooked breads and meats with getting sick from the arsenic. Their strange language would simply be Flemish, utterly foreign to the English-speaking villagers of Woolpit. The girl's description of a twilight land could be a child's memory of the deep, shaded forests where they hid, or even the foggy, low-light conditions of their homeland. More speculative ideas, of course, have flourished, suggesting the children were extraterrestrials from a planet with a dim star, or visitors from a subterranean world within our own hollow Earth. Yet the most likely answer is a deeply human one, a story of displaced refugees, nutritional deficiency, and the profound shock of being thrust into a completely alien culture. The legend of the Green Children endures because it lives in that perfect space between folklore and fact, a single, verdant mystery sprouting from the fertile soil of history. Death Valley holds a secret written not in stone, but in the trails they leave behind. On the immense, flat expanse of the racetrack playa, a dry lake bed as smooth as a tabletop, rocks seem to go for solitary walks. These sailing stones, some weighing over 700 pounds, slide across the hardened mud, carving long, meandering tracks into the earth. Some trails run straight for hundreds of feet, while others curve gracefully or even loop back on themselves as if the rocks were dancing to a silent tune. For over a century, this was one of geology's most playful and perplexing puzzles. How could these heavy stones move without any human or animal intervention, leaving no trace of what pushed them? The sheer isolation of the playa ruled out pranksters, and the absence of any consistent wind pattern deep enough to blow such massive objects only deepened the mystery. Scientists proposed everything from powerful dust devils and slippery bacterial slime to intense magnetic fields, but none of these theories could fully explain the precise, often elegant trails. The breakthrough finally came in late 2013 when a team of researchers installed a weather station and time-lapse cameras, patiently waiting for nature to reveal its secret. Their diligence paid off in the winter of 2014. The phenomenon they discovered requires a perfect, delicate recipe. First, the playa must flood with just enough rainwater to create a shallow, temporary lake. Then, on a cold desert night, a thin sheet of windowpane ice forms on the surface. As the sun rises and the ice begins to melt, it breaks into large, floating panels. A light wind, no stronger than a gentle breeze, then pushes these ice sheets across the slick, watery mud. The rocks, partially embedded in the ice, are simply carried along like passengers on a raft, their trailing edges gouging the soft mud below to create the signature tracks. This elegant solution, captured on camera, showed the stones moving at a slow, almost imperceptible crawl. Yet, even with this discovery, a sliver of the mystery remains. The specific conditions are so rare and precise that not every track can be perfectly recreated in experiments. Why do some stones move while others just a few feet away stay perfectly still? How does the wind exert enough force on the thin ice to push such immense weight? The sailing stones remind us that even when a mystery is solved, nature often holds back one final, beautiful secret, proving that the most satisfying answers often lead to new, more subtle questions. A polished metallic sphere rested silently in the Florida undergrowth, a perfect geometric form hiding an impossible secret. When the Betts family stumbled upon it in March 1974 on their large, fire-damaged property, it seemed like a curious souvenir, perhaps a piece of space junk from a nearby naval base. It was about 8 inches in diameter, made of a stainless steel-like material, and surprisingly heavy. They took it back to their Spanish-style home as a conversation piece, but the conversation was about to take a very strange turn. 2 weeks later, as Terry Betts practiced his guitar, the sphere began to react. It emitted a low, rhythmic humming sound, a vibration that seemed to respond to certain musical chords. Then it started to move. The family watched in disbelief as the sphere rolled across the floor on its own, changed direction to avoid hitting a wall, and then, most unnervingly, seemed to return to a person who called for it. It was as if the object was alive, or at the very least possessed a form of rudimentary intelligence. The phenomena escalated. Doors in the house would slam shut for no reason, and the family's German shepherd would whimper and hide when the sphere was active. They claimed it could stop and start rolling at will, and that it even pulsed with a low resonance like a tuning fork when the sun hit it directly. Intrigued and alarmed, they contacted the authorities. Reporters and scientists descended on the Betts home, turning their life into a media circus. The sphere was subjected to a battery of tests. Researchers from a major corporation confirmed it was non-magnetic and perfectly balanced to an astonishing degree. They attempted to cut into it with industrial tools, but a hard, blast-proof inner shell resisted all efforts. X-rays revealed an even greater puzzle. Inside the sphere were 2 smaller, dense objects, and what appeared to be 3 magnetic poles, a geometric impossibility for a single sphere. The theories flourished in the public imagination. Was it a piece of a spy satellite, a self-guided probe from another world, or some top-secret military technology that had gone astray? The government, however, soon offered a more prosaic explanation. An official from a manufacturing company identified it as a type of ball valve component from a pulpwood grinding machine, a simple piece of industrial equipment. This seemed to solve the mystery for many, but for the Betts family and close observers, the explanation felt incomplete. A simple ball valve does not roll uphill, avoid obstacles, or resonate in response to music. The sphere's behavior defied the laws of physics as they were understood. The story of the Betts sphere is a classic modern enigma, a collision between the ordinary and the inexplicable. It forces us to ask whether we witnessed a brief, real-world glitch in reality, a simple object misunderstood and given life by suggestion and fear, or a genuine artifact whose true purpose we were never meant to understand. In the end, the sphere itself fell silent, its strange activities ceasing as mysteriously as they began, leaving behind only a trail of baffled witnesses and a question mark forged in stainless steel. A stark granite monument rose from the Georgia red clay, a modern Stonehenge built not for the sun, but for humanity itself. Erected in 1980 in Elbert County, The Georgia Guidestones consisted of 6 massive slabs of granite, weighing over 240,000 pounds in total, capped by a heavy stone tablet. Its true architects were a phantom, a group operating under the pseudonym R.C. Christian, who paid for the entire project in cash and vanished back into obscurity, leaving no trace of their identity or true purpose. The mystery was not in its construction, but in its message. Carved into the stone in 8 of the world's most prominent modern languages were 10 guides or commandments for a future age. These directives were stark and provocative. They called for maintaining humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature, guiding reproduction wisely to improve fitness and diversity, and unifying humanity with a living new language. Other guides advocated for ruling with tempered reason and faith, protecting people and nations with fair laws, and avoiding petty lawsuits and useless officials. The final injunction was perhaps the most cryptic, urging humanity not to be a cancer on the earth, but to leave room for nature. To ensure the message spanned the ages, a shorter summary was also inscribed in 4 ancient scripts: Babylonian cuneiform, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. This was not a relic from a lost civilization, but a deliberate message bottle thrown into the future by an anonymous hand. The Guidestones immediately became a magnet for intense speculation. For some, they were a blueprint for a sustainable, rational future, a hopeful vision from a group of enlightened humanists. For others, they represented a dark, elitist plan for global depopulation and control, their call for a reduced population seen as a genocidal threat. The monument drew pilgrims, conspiracy theorists, and protesters in equal measure, its plain-spoken words becoming a Rorschach test for humanity's deepest fears and highest hopes. The mystery of R.C. Christian only fueled the fire, with theories ranging from a secret society of Rosicrucians to a single, wealthy eccentric with a grand philosophical vision. The stones stood for over 4 decades, a silent sermon in granite, until a bomb partially destroyed them in 2022, leading to their complete demolition for public safety. Their physical form is now gone, but the questions they raised echo louder than ever. Were they a warning, a prophecy, or merely a thought experiment carved in stone? The anonymous sponsors ensured we would never know their true intent, forcing us to confront the message on its own terms, a set of rules for a world we have not yet built. A modern jetliner can simply vanish from the face of the earth. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, a Boeing 777 carrying 239 people from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, ascended into a clear night sky and then disappeared from all radar screens. Its final communication with air traffic control was a casual "Good night, Malaysian 370, offering no hint of the mystery that would follow. Instead of continuing its northward journey, the aircraft made a sudden, silent turn back over the Malay Peninsula, switched off its transponder, and flew on for hours, a ghost guided by an unknown hand across the vast, empty expanse of the southern Indian Ocean. The scale of the search that followed was unprecedented, involving more than 24 nations and scouring thousands of square miles of ocean. Initial efforts focused on the South China Sea, based on the flight's intended path, but it was satellite data, known as handshakes, that revealed the plane's true, tragic course. These automated signals indicated the aircraft flew south until it ran out of fuel, crashing into one of the most remote and deepest parts of the planet. For years, ships and aircraft combed the suspected impact zone, mapping the seabed and recovering only a few confirmed pieces of debris that washed ashore on islands like Réunion and Madagascar. Each fragment, a flaperon or a piece of wing, was a heartbreaking confirmation of the crash but provided no insight into the why. The leading theories are as numerous as they are unsettling. Could a sudden and catastrophic event, like a rapid decompression from a hull breach or an intense fire that disabled key systems, have rendered the crew unconscious while the autopilot flew on until fuel exhaustion? Or does the evidence point toward a deliberate human act, a pilot suicide or a deliberate hijacking that bypassed all security to orchestrate this disappearance? The very lack of definitive evidence has allowed every scenario to persist, each one failing to fully explain the known facts. The cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, the black boxes that hold the final answers, lie somewhere on an ocean floor miles deep, their locator beacons long silent. For the families of the 239 souls on board, this absence of a cause is a perpetual open wound. They are left with the agonizing uncertainty of not knowing what happened in those final hours, a pain compounded by the sheer normality of the flight's beginning. This is not a mystery buried in ancient history or sealed in a dusty archive. It is a raw, modern tragedy that demonstrates with chilling clarity how our most advanced technology can still be defeated by the immense, silent wilderness of the natural world. How can something so large, so connected, simply be erased without a reason? From ancient vanishings to modern disappearances, we have journeyed through 25 of history's most profound and perplexing puzzles. Each event, from the silent departure of the Roanoke colonists to the ghostly flight of MH370, represents a crack in the foundation of our understanding. These are not just forgotten footnotes, they are gaping voids in the narrative of our past, moments where the trail of evidence runs cold and the story simply stops. What binds them together is something deeply human, our innate and powerful desire to find answers, to connect the dots and impose order on the chaos of the unknown. These mysteries endure not because they are old, but because they are unresolved. They are the questions that refuse to be silenced, the whispers from the past that challenge our certainty about the present. They prove that history is not a sealed archive of settled facts, but a living, breathing field of discovery, constantly rewritten with each new clue and each new generation of curious minds. These enigmas remind us that for all our advanced science and accumulated knowledge, there are still shadows where the past keeps its most fascinating secrets. So we turn the question over to you. Which of these 25 unexplained origins captured your imagination the most? Was it the silent stones of Karnak, the cryptic codes of the Zodiac, or the haunting green children of Woolpit? Share your favorite mystery and your own theories in the comments below. The conversation is what keeps these stories alive. And if you are hungry for more journeys into the unknown, be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the world's greatest historical enigmas. The next secret is waiting to be uncovered.